Jeremy's been with them for over 19 years. So we're going to learn a lot from him, a lot of great stuff. But before we talk about Bessemer and what you're doing, Jeremy, can you give us a little context, bring us back, understand where you started? You were at McKinsey, AEA, also at Duke University, which I think you were roommates with Christian Leitner back in the 92 era. I'm not sure, but why don't you give some context before before Bessemer Venture Partners? Whatever, introduce yourself.
Sure. So I studied computer science at Duke back before it was popular to study computer science. I graduated in the mid-90s. And then I joined McKinsey after college. At the time, the tech company to think about was Microsoft. Most of the other tech titans didn't exist, or Apple did, but barely in its current form. But I was entranced by the extremely articulate people I met at McKinsey and their fancy accents, and I wanted to be like them. And so I ended up abandoning a career in engineering or computer science and becoming a business person instead. And basically, I spent the first 6 years of my career hopping between jobs. I worked at McKinsey for 2 years, AEA, which is a private equity firm or a leveraged buyout firm, as it was known at the time, was another 2-year stint. And then I got my first real job, which was at a software startup. It didn't ultimately succeed, but it also lasted about 2 years. And Bessemer was my fourth job. My dad, who's a doctor, said, "What are you doing? Why can't you hold a job down for more than 2 years?" Because he decided when he was 19 what he was going to do for the next 50 plus years of his life. And for me, it was a massive blessing, maybe in disguise in part, because I basically got to try all these different things. And it turns out when you're relatively young and early in your career, it's much easier to convince someone to take a chance on you because it's not a big bet for them. They'll give you a shot knowing that they don't really have to employ you for the long run, but they'll take a shot at you. And so that's what I did for the first 8 years of my career. I took a few shots where people took a few shots on me. And the Bessemer job was also designed as a 2-year program, but 19 years later, I'm still there. So I was in a little bit of the right place at the right time, and it was a great fit. And I've been having a blast doing it ever since.
As you jumped around, as you said, were there any mentors or people that you looked up to that helped you along the way, and some lessons you learned from them that you take with you today that you share with either your portfolio companies or your team around you at Bessemer?
Yeah, there were a bunch. I mean, because my first 3 jobs lasted only 2 years each, while I'm still in touch with a bunch of people who I met there, including my wife, by the way. She was a year behind me at McKinsey and is still there. And so I have a lot of ties and connections to McKinsey. But the truth is, I wasn't at any of those places long enough to have a super deep and long-lasting relationship. So most of my mentorship came at Bessemer. I've basically been there for virtually the entirety of my career. And I think one thing a lot of people say about the investing business is that it's an apprenticeship business. And I think that's true. You can't really learn it by reading a book. You kind of learn it by doing it. And that's dangerous, because if you learn something by doing it, it means by definition, you don't know what you're doing when you start. And so you need a mentor or what do they call it, like a master, if you will, to help you avoid making too many mistakes, and from whom you can get guidance along the way. So I've had a few of them at Bessemer. I joined and I worked for 2 or 3 different partners primarily before I became a partner myself a few years in. I think probably the most important lesson, if you will, that I've internalized, and it's easier to internalize it when you're further into your career than it is at the beginning, is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's a trite saying, but I think it's especially true in almost anything. It applies equally to one's career, also to one's startup if you're trying to create a company from nothing. And we all tend to hear about these things that seem to happen really fast. Perhaps my favorite example is the Wikipedia. The Wikipedia is sort of an overnight success that was 10 years in the making. In fact, what typically happens behind any story of success is a lot of day in, day out, year in, year out grinding before something becomes successful. And if you look back on it, it's actually hard to pinpoint one specific moment where it went from not working to working, but it was an accumulation of lots of little things. And so probably the advice I carry around myself and also pass along to entrepreneurs all the time is just that. You have to have the self-awareness and wherewithal to know when something is truly not going to work, because continuing to work on something that's destined for failure isn't all that productive. But if you still believe, make sure you have the patience to stick with something for a long period of time, because building something great takes a long period of time. There are no shortcuts.
Yeah, it sounds like having that patience obviously is very important. And you've obviously built something great with Bessemer Venture Partners. You've been there for a while, so you're obviously doing something right, and you have a pretty good record to go with that. Let's talk about the business, Bessemer Venture Partners. You know, you're investing in entrepreneurs who want to build revolutions of their own, is what your website says. Backing people in innovative technologies. Can you just give us a little context of Bessemer Venture Partners for the one person or two people that don't know about it, who are on this chat right now? But you know, what you're focusing on, what your strategies are, and what you're doing that is making a difference there.
Sure. I mean, so at a high level, there are about 50 investment professionals that work at Bessemer. I'm one of them. I have about 15 peers who are partners, and each of us is trying to think about one or two or maybe three what we call roadmaps. And a roadmap might be a new technology that's emerged, a new trend, a demographic shift, some catalyst that allows for scrappy little companies to win, even if they're facing massive competitors in the marketplace. And so we develop internal hypotheses, we test them, we talk to industry experts, academics, entrepreneurs to refine them. And then we often will proactively go out and try to find companies in which we want to invest that meet those criteria. We do that sometimes with a check size that might be as small as $25,000. And we do that sometimes with a check size that might be as much as $100 or $200 million, and everything in between. Most of what we do are what I'll call classic Series A, Series B, Series C venture capital investments, $2, $5, $10, $15 million. But we're somewhat indifferent as to how big the company is when we first encounter it. We love making Series A bets, but sometimes by the time we discover a specific trend or a shift or a new technology emerging, it's a little later. So we'll make a slightly bigger investment in a slightly later company. But that's what we do. We do it everywhere around the world. We have offices throughout the US on the East and West Coast. We also have an office in India, an office in Israel. We've invested quite a bit in Europe. And so I personally have been on a plane and invested in South America, in Russia, in Korea. And so we don't discriminate against the stage or the geography. So long as we think there's a really talented entrepreneur with an idea that we can get behind, we consider it seriously.
We have a lot of entrepreneurs on here. Entre is a network for entrepreneurs. We got some potential investors on here too. But when you're looking at those types of founders who are laying out that roadmap, so to speak, or anyone who's building the company, what type of characteristics are you looking in a founder or a company to potentially succeed and that you would invest in?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I think about this a lot because I'm in a privileged spot to meet lots of entrepreneurs early in their journey building a company. And when I think back on those who I've had the good fortune to meet and spend a lot of time with as an investor or board member or both, it feels obvious with the benefit of hindsight that, wow, this person was really talented. And you know, a few examples come to mind, like Jeremy Stoppelman, the CEO and founder of Yelp. I met him in 2005 and invested in the company. He was clearly talented, but he was an engineering manager at PayPal. He had gone to Harvard Business School, dropped out after a year, and there was nothing about him that reeked like, hey, this guy's going to be a really talented CEO. But of course, 10 years later, when Yelp is a very successful public company, it's sort of obvious that, hey, that guy was really talented and could scale. But I think in truth, it's only obvious in hindsight. And early on, we tend to think about all the weaknesses or the lack of experience somebody has. And so I actually try really hard not to put too much of a value judgment on a specific founder, because I find it's just so hard to know. You know, certain people can grow massively and other people hit their ceiling much faster. And so instead, I tend to focus on what they like to talk about and what they're focused on. And so as an example, founders who are really focused on the impact their idea, product, business is going to have, tend to resonate with me. Founders who are really focused on the product and the details of the product and what makes the customer really happy and excited. That tends to excite me. Founders who are focused on other things like the competitors, that tends to be a bit of a turnoff for me, because what it means is that they're more worried about what other people are doing than what they're doing. Or founders that are focused on how they're going to make money, that also tends to be a little bit of a turnoff. Of course, we invest in businesses, and generally speaking, we profit from those investments when the companies make money. So it's not that thinking about how the company is going to make money is a bad thing, but when a founder seems particularly interested or obsessed with making money, that's a turnoff. Generally speaking, that falls out naturally from building a successful company. It shouldn't be the primary goal. And so I've sort of learned over time to screen for certain attributes and shy away from others. But it's tricky, and the truth of the matter is you can try to establish patterns when you look back and try to match the next opportunity against those. But oftentimes you sort of get led astray because none of those things are correct. As if
it's funny.
I'm laughing because
it's
work from home and my daughter interrupted me to enter the password to her iPad. This is the world we live in now.
I got 3 kids screaming in the background, tucked in their bedroom, so I understand. Believe me.